Hello to you bookworms out there during this time of quarantine. For this week's review, I decided to review this book, The Castle by Franz Kafka. This book was originally published in 1926 and was left unfinished due to Kafka's untimely death in 1924. So it is safe to assume that it got published 2 years after his death by some of his close acquaintances. The story of this book is both uninteresting and intriguing at the same time, to say the least. And I cannot, to be honest, think of any other author that could pull this off as good as Franz Kafka did with the publication of this book. The story starts with Kay, a land surveyor, arriving at a village in the vicinity of a castle. And I don't mean just any castle, but the castle in the title of the book. Now, in retrospect, I think that it was a dry joke, and just forgive me for that. Continuing on with the review, though. Kafka does not fail to entertain his readers with the all too familiar environment of most of his books, and that is namely the royalty, the superior royalty family, who are basically the people of the castle, a gloomy village with its nosy but silent inhabitants, which is very creepy. When you read the book, it will present itself and you cannot miss it. And the always snowy weather that is predominant throughout the course of the story, and it makes everything difficult. It makes the mood of the book too depressing, beside everything else that happens, and it is very depressing. Believe me, you would not want to be in Kay's place when such events are happening to him. It is important to note that the villagers look as frivolous and unintelligent to Kay, as Kay looks ignorant and unfamiliar to how formalities usually run their course in the castle. And Kay, a land surveyor who is called by a mistake by the castle in order to survey the land in the vicinity of the castle, is a man who does not compromise, nor does he stand down from what he believes in to be right. The reader, however, is easily able to recognize the similarities between the main characters from the castle and the trial being Kafka's other book. The similarities, to name a few, are smaller than usual rooms, poorly lit rooms, and NPCs, namely non-player characters. Non-player characters. I'm going into the realm of gaming. Guys, just ignore me. And I mean, by NPCs, I mean basically the characters other than the main character. The main character being the intelligent one, and others being ignorant of the whole situation that is going on around them. And they think of the K very low, and they think of him as someone who is not respectful of how important the men of the castle are, and how regular people are not allowed to talk with any people of authority, and namely that basically they expect K to obey whatever that people of the castle are telling him to do. But K is not one to compromise, and is not one to go under rule of someone else without reasoning, right? So that is a very distinguishing feature of the main character, and it is very important to note this specific feature as you go along with reading this book. And basically, Kay, because was called to castle by mistake, and he is forced by the village commissioner and his girlfriend Frida, who lives in the village as well, to take up on a role of the school janitor, which is pretty different from land surveying, which is his professional job, presumably in the fictional world that Kafka has presented us with. The rest of the story, however, as I said, is successful in confusing the reader with a bombardment of characters that are changing from one scene to the next, and it is pretty vexing for the reader to keep track of all of them, although some of them might not even appear in the preceding events until the end of the book. And the ending of the book, that is, if you keep yourself up to actually read the book until the end, will leave the reader with this unsatisfying and frustrating way that Kafka leaves the book unfinished. Because by the end of the book, Kay has still a lot to work for in order to get to the castle. He's still engaged to Frida, and by the way, he has to deal with his two stupid assistants. And these two assistants, believe me, you would want to like strangle them if these two characters were not fictional, because they act very childishly, and they are not living up to the standards of a professional assistant and how one should really act as a role of an assistant, really, because they shout, they play, and they are doing things that are far from what an assistant should usually do as his job. And that is pretty much everything that I've planned to say about this book. And if you ever decided to read The Castle by Franz Kafka, just keep in mind that this is an unfinished book, and it is a very interesting read nonetheless, because the events, some of them at least, will keep you interested throughout the journey of the K, in order for him to reach to the castle and finally do his job as a surveyor, what he was meant to do from the beginning. And I want to actually finish the episode for this week with this question, and that is, how would Kafka have written the ending of the book had he lived enough in order to finish the book? And I think my honest opinion would be that Kay is pretty much deserving a happy ending, and that is for him to be able to reach the castle finally, breaking the barriers of formalities in the castle, and be able to do his job finally as a surveyor, and to be able to get the hell out of that village as soon as he can, with or without his fiancée, namely Frida. And I hope that you enjoyed the review for this week, and stay tuned, or don't, for another quarantine content. Have a good day and week, or whatever. Bye.